Hey everyone! Tonight we're drifting back more than 1,000 years to a cold coastline where the sea rarely stays quiet for very long. So settle into a comfortable position, dim the lights if you can, and let your shoulders slowly relax. Tonight, we're following a group of people who almost never get to tell their own side of history. When most people picture the Viking Age, they imagine enormous men with axes, dragon-headed ships, and impressive beards doing very energetic things to monasteries. Which is understandable. Medieval chroniclers were much more interested in writing about burning buildings than ordinary families trying to get through another winter. But once the ships sailed away, someone was always left behind. Tonight, we're following the women whose villages were conquered. Not the queens whose names survived in sagas. Not the shield maidens whose stories may or may not have grown taller every time they were retold around a fireplace. Just ordinary women. Farmers' wives. Young daughters. Grandmothers who had already survived several bad harvests and would now discover that history had prepared one more unpleasant surprise. As always, history is rarely tidy. Sometimes a village resisted. Sometimes it surrendered immediately. Sometimes the attackers were Vikings. Sometimes the Vikings themselves became the conquered. Because despite their reputation for arriving unexpectedly in someone else's village, Scandinavian kingdoms eventually discovered that they, too, could lose wars. It turns out everyone gets a turn eventually. So let's drift gently into one such morning. Imagine waking before sunrise. The house is warm enough because yesterday someone remembered to bring in extra firewood. Smoke curls lazily toward a hole in the roof. Sheep are beginning to stir outside. Someone is grinding grain. A child is still asleep beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of lanolin. Life is ordinary. Wonderfully ordinary. And then dogs begin barking. That sound probably arrived before anyone saw the ships. Dogs are remarkably good historians. They notice trouble well before humans begin arguing about whether trouble is really happening. Perhaps someone climbs the nearby hill. Perhaps someone already knows exactly what those sails mean. Perhaps they have seen them before. The village suddenly becomes very busy. Men collect whatever weapons they own. Which sounds impressive until we remember that many farmers owned equipment designed primarily for persuading stubborn cows rather than professional soldiers. Axes become weapons. Wooden spears appear from storage. Someone realizes they forgot where the shield was placed last autumn. Because of course they did. Meanwhile, women are making decisions every bit as important. Hide valuables. Gather children. Move elderly relatives. Collect whatever food can be carried. Not because anyone expects a comfortable journey. Simply because surviving tomorrow requires eating today. Modern films often present Viking raids, or medieval raids generally, as dramatic battles between armored warriors. Reality was usually far messier. Raiding depended upon speed. The attackers hoped resistance would collapse quickly. The defenders hoped help would arrive before that happened. Usually it didn't. Once resistance ended, the difficult part truly began. For the women who survived, life divided itself neatly into two categories. Everything before today. Everything after today. Some women remained where they were. Conquering armies needed functioning farms. Fields do not harvest themselves. Animals continue requiring attention regardless of who claims ownership of the land this week. A conqueror who killed every farmer would soon discover the surprising nutritional limitations of victory. So many women simply continued working. The same cows. The same fields. The same spinning wheels. Only now under someone else's authority. Imagine living inside your own home while every familiar object quietly reminds you that nothing actually belongs to you anymore. Your table. Someone else's rules. Your sheep. Someone else's taxes. Your village. Someone else's flag. History often treats conquest as a single event. For ordinary people, it became thousands of tiny daily adjustments. Who receives the grain? Who decides marriages? Who owns the livestock? Who settles disputes? Who gets punished? The answer kept changing. For younger women, another possibility appeared: enslavement. The Viking world contained slavery, known in Old Norse as thrall labor. This was not unusual for medieval Europe. Unfortunately, almost everyone practiced some version of slavery. Human beings have displayed remarkable consistency in inventing unpleasant ways to exploit each other. Captives represented wealth. Unlike silver, they could work. Unlike livestock, they could understand instructions. Unlike treasure, they occasionally attempted escape, which made ownership rather more complicated. Women taken captive might travel astonishing distances. A young woman captured somewhere around Ireland could eventually find herself in Norway. Someone seized in Scotland might later appear in Iceland. Others traveled east through river systems toward markets connected with the Byzantine Empire or the Islamic world. The Viking trading networks reached farther than many people imagine. Unfortunately for captives, commerce was impressively efficient. One moment your entire universe consists of one valley. A few months later you're hearing languages you've never imagined while wondering whether you'll ever again see trees that look familiar. Most never did. Archaeology tells us some of these women eventually became part of Scandinavian households. Not necessarily as servants forever. Some gained freedom. Some married. Some raised children whose descendants no longer remembered precisely where their grandmother had first been born. History quietly absorbs people like this. One generation passes. Accents soften. Children grow up. Grandchildren simply consider themselves local. Family stories fade. Eventually, only modern genetic studies notice that someone, centuries ago, arrived from somewhere far across the sea. DNA has become rather good at uncovering secrets that medieval gossip forgot. Life inside a Viking household was demanding regardless of status. Women's work rarely ended. Textile production alone consumed astonishing amounts of time. Clothing was handmade. Sails for ships required enormous quantities of woven wool. A single sail represented years of labor, not weeks. Years. When people admire Viking longships, they're usually impressed by the timber. The women spinning thread may quietly deserve just as much credit. Without sails, those famous ships become surprisingly expensive floating logs. So even enslaved women performed work absolutely essential to Viking society. Cooking, milking, brewing, weaving, childcare, food preservation, animal tending. Everything necessary to keep a household alive through Scandinavian winters that had absolutely no interest in anyone's personal feelings. Life remained physically exhausting. Yet medieval slavery was not always identical everywhere. Some enslaved people eventually purchased freedom. Others were freed by owners. Some became trusted household members. Others endured brutal treatment throughout their lives. There was no universal experience, which can be frustrating for historians. Human beings stubbornly refused to fit into tidy categories. Sometimes a woman captured during warfare later became the mother of children who inherited property. Sometimes another died anonymously only months after capture. Both realities existed simultaneously. One of the quieter tragedies is how little survives in their own voices. Literacy remained limited. Most written sources came from elite men, monks, clerics, officials, saga authors, people interested primarily in kings doing king-shaped activities, not frightened young women trying to remember the route back to a childhood home that no longer existed. Imagine how many stories disappeared simply because nobody asked. Did they remember songs from childhood? Did they teach those songs to new children? Did recipes travel with them? Did they secretly continue customs from home? Did they whisper old prayers while publicly following new religions? History answers some questions, The rest disappear into silence. Even so, archaeology occasionally gives us gentle hints. A brooch buried far from where it was originally crafted. A style of weaving appearing unexpectedly. Food traditions that seem oddly imported. Tiny clues. Little whispers across 1,000 years. Enough to remind us that migration is rarely voluntary simply because maps later make it appear ordinary. Meanwhile, not every conquered village disappeared forever. Some recovered. Buildings were rebuilt. Families remarried. Children grew up knowing only peace. At least until the next regional conflict inevitably arrived. Because medieval politics possessed an almost supernatural ability to create fresh disagreements. Kings argued over inheritance. Jarls argued over territory. Neighbors argued over livestock. Entire wars occasionally resembled extremely expensive family disagreements that lasted decades. Ordinary women simply kept adapting. Perhaps that is the least glamorous lesson history repeatedly offers. Not dramatic heroism. Not legendary battles. Adaptation. Getting through tomorrow. Finding food. Keeping children warm. Learning new customs. Continuing because there is, quite inconveniently, another sunrise waiting. And perhaps that's where we'll gently pause for tonight's first stretch of our journey. We've watched villages change hands. We've followed women carried across unfamiliar seas. We've seen households rebuilt from lives that never expected to begin again. The Viking Age is often remembered through warriors and kings. But beneath every famous raid, every celebrated victory, and every saga proudly recited beside a fire, there were countless women quietly doing what humans have always done after catastrophe. They survived. Sometimes with extraordinary resilience. Sometimes simply because survival was the only remaining choice. And, as we'll discover next, conquest rarely ended with capture. For many women, the truly complicated part began when politics, marriage, inheritance, and religion slowly reshaped their lives in ways no sword ever could. Let's settle back in for another quiet stretch of our journey. Perhaps by now the fire has burned a little lower. Outside, the wind is still making its patient way across the sea, just as it did 1,000 years ago. The waves continue arriving one after another with remarkable dedication, apparently having never considered taking a day off. When we left our travelers, many of the women who had survived conquest had crossed the sea into places they had never expected to see. For some, that voyage lasted only a few days. For others, weeks. Long enough for the familiar coastline to disappear completely. Long enough for home to become a memory instead of a place. The first thing many captives probably noticed was not the language. It was the smell. Every place has its own scent. Salt water mixed with pine forests. Fresh peat smoke drifting from longhouses. Drying fish hanging from wooden beams. Wet wool. Wood shavings. Livestock. 100 little details that quietly told someone they were somewhere entirely different. Our modern world is filled with familiar things. A loaf of bread in one country often resembles a loaf of bread somewhere else. Cities share similar streets. People wear remarkably similar clothes. The Viking Age was far less standardized. Travel just a few hundred miles, and nearly everything changed. Different customs. Different clothing. Different food. Different gods. Sometimes different rules about which side of the table everyone should sit. Human beings have always been surprisingly enthusiastic about inventing customs that seem perfectly obvious to themselves and completely mysterious to everyone else. Imagine arriving at a household where nobody understands your language. You cannot ask where to sleep. You cannot explain your name correctly. You cannot tell someone that your younger brother hated cabbage but loved smoked fish. Not because these facts are especially important, simply because they are yours. When language disappears, little pieces of identity disappear with it. That is one of the quiet cruelties of displacement. Over time, many women learned Old Norse. Not because they necessarily wanted to, because daily life demanded it. You needed words for bread, for water, for sheep, for spinning wool, for children. Interestingly, children often became the bridge between worlds. Young minds absorb languages with astonishing speed. A child born to a captive mother might grow up speaking the local tongue effortlessly while understanding fragments of another language heard only in whispered lullabies. Perhaps a grandmother quietly repeated old songs. Perhaps she stopped. Perhaps remembering became too painful. History cannot tell us. But anyone whose grandparents came from another country may recognize the pattern. A few unusual words survive. A recipe. A blessing. A way of folding cloth. A story that nobody quite understands anymore. Cultures rarely disappear all at once. They slowly blur together, like two colors meeting in water. This blending happened throughout the Viking world. The image many people carry of Viking society is one of remarkable sameness. Blonde warriors, cold fjords, long ships. Everyone apparently named Eric. Reality was considerably more complicated. Scandinavia traded with almost everyone it could reach. Silver coins from the Islamic world have been discovered buried in Viking hoards. Silks traveled astonishing distances. Glass beads crossed continents. People moved alongside goods. Some voluntarily, others very much against their wishes. Over generations, these movements quietly reshaped entire populations. Modern genetic research continues uncovering just how connected the Viking world really became. A family living in Norway might include ancestors from Ireland. Another in Iceland could trace roots to Scotland. Someone buried in Denmark might have spent childhood in what is now England. The medieval world appears isolated until you start following individual lives. Then suddenly everyone seems to be traveling enormous distances, usually without particularly comfortable footwear. For women who entered Scandinavian households as captives, life varied enormously depending upon circumstance. Some remained enslaved throughout their lives. Others experienced gradual changes in status. A household depended upon trust. Managing livestock required trust. Preparing food required trust. Helping raise children required trust. Running a large farm demanded cooperation. Over years, relationships inevitably became more complicated than the simple labels historians sometimes use. That does not make slavery gentle. Far from it. But daily life has a way of creating complicated human relationships even inside profoundly unequal systems. People argued, worked together, grieved together, celebrated births, buried relatives, shared winters. History often prefers neat categories. Life rarely provides them. There were also practical realities. The Viking world was not overflowing with people. Communities remained relatively small. Disease claimed lives regularly. Accidents happened. Winters could be unforgiving. Every capable worker mattered. Every experienced weaver mattered. Every knowledgeable healer mattered. Women's skills were not optional additions to society. They were central to survival. Take weaving, for example. It sounds peaceful, almost relaxing. Modern advertisements might convince you it involves smiling gently beside a sunny window while making decorative scarves. The Viking version was considerably more demanding. A single household needed clothing for everyone. Blankets, sacks, ropes, sails, repair work, replacement garments. Everything began with sheep. Then came shearing, cleaning wool, carding, spinning, weaving, dyeing, sewing, repairing. Repeat forever. If someone invented a magical machine capable of completing all textile work instantly, Viking women might have declared them ruler of the known world without asking too many questions. Instead, they had drop spindles. And patience. Lots of patience. This domestic work rarely appears in heroic sagas. Nobody composed epic poems about successfully repairing 12 tunics before winter, which is unfortunate, because surviving winter probably deserved at least a short ballad. Meanwhile, religion quietly added another layer to daily life. Many captives originally came from Christian communities. Scandinavia during the early Viking Age largely followed Norse pagan traditions. Thor, Odin, Freya. A remarkable collection of gods who frequently behaved like exceptionally dramatic relatives at an awkward family gathering. Then Christianity gradually spread northward. Kings converted, sometimes sincerely, sometimes because conversion made diplomacy considerably easier, sometimes because neighboring kingdoms possessed very persuasive armies. Religion in medieval Europe often spread through a fascinating combination of genuine faith and political convenience. A woman taken from a Christian village into a pagan household might later find herself living in a Christian kingdom again, all without moving. The rulers simply changed beliefs. Naturally, everyone else was expected to adjust. Because kings have long believed changing national religion should be about as straightforward as rearranging furniture. Reality proved somewhat slower. Old customs lingered. People quietly mixed traditions. A Christian prayer here, an older seasonal celebration there. Ancient habits possess remarkable staying power, especially when they involve food. Holiday meals are surprisingly difficult to eliminate. Marriage also became a complicated subject. Some enslaved women formed recognized unions. Others entered relationships with little legal protection. Some became mothers. Children altered everything. Inheritance suddenly mattered. Status mattered. Family connections mattered. The law became deeply interested in questions that previously attracted little attention. Who counted as legitimate? Who inherited property? Who belonged to which family? Medieval legal systems loved asking these questions, mostly because land was involved. Nothing motivates lawmakers quite like fields. The Icelandic law codes and later Scandinavian legal traditions reveal societies trying to organize increasingly complicated family relationships, not always successfully. Human families have resisted simple organization since the beginning of recorded history, perhaps since before that. Imagine one household, an elderly farmer, his wife, 2 adult sons, a daughter recently married, 3 grandchildren, an elderly servant, an enslaved woman captured years earlier, her children, a hired laborer staying through harvest, 1 orphan nephew, several sheep that absolutely refused to cooperate, everyone sharing meals beneath the same roof. It would have been noisy, crowded, busy, and probably smelled strongly of livestock. Longhouses were remarkable buildings. Warm, practical, dark. Smoke drifted through the interior before escaping overhead. Animals sometimes occupied sections of the same building during harsh weather. Privacy existed mostly as an interesting concept rather than an everyday reality. There were very few places to be completely alone. Perhaps that explains why so many medieval people enjoyed going outside whenever possible. Fresh air must have felt positively luxurious. Winter evenings stretched endlessly. Work continued indoors. Stories filled the darkness. Sagas were recited. Family histories repeated. Children listened. Some stories grew slightly more impressive with every telling. An ancestor who successfully frightened away 1 thief eventually became someone who defeated 12 armed warriors single-handedly. Because memory enjoys polishing family reputations. One wonders how many captive women quietly listened to these tales while privately thinking, that is not at all how it happened. History depends heavily upon whoever gets to tell the story afterward. The fortunate few whose voices survive become everyone's representatives. The rest vanish into silence. Yet archaeology keeps gently interrupting that silence. A spindle found beside a burial. Imported jewelry worn for decades. Chemical analysis showing where someone spent childhood based upon minerals preserved inside teeth. Science has become unexpectedly good at asking skeletons where they grew up. They rarely answer dramatically, just quietly, patiently, one measurement at a time, and those answers increasingly reveal lives filled with movement. Movement across oceans, across kingdoms, across cultures, sometimes chosen, often not. The Viking world was never simply a collection of fearless warriors charging across Europe. It was also a world of women rebuilding ordinary lives after extraordinary disruptions. Cooking another meal, teaching another child, repairing another cloak, watching another winter arrive. Not because history demanded heroism, because tomorrow required breakfast. And breakfast, inconveniently enough, never prepares itself. So we'll continue drifting onward, following these quiet lives as they become woven into new families, new kingdoms, and eventually a Europe that would scarcely remember where so many of its people had first begun. Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we continue drifting through the quieter corners of the Viking world. The ships have sailed. The battles have ended. The smoke has faded from the fields. And now we arrive at the part of history that is usually the least dramatic and, strangely enough, often the most interesting. What happens after everything changes? Because conquest is usually remembered as a single moment. A village is attacked. A kingdom falls. A ruler is defeated. Someone writes it down. Everyone moves on. Except the people who actually had to live afterward. For the women who survived Viking raids, conquest, and displacement, the story did not end when the ships disappeared beyond the horizon. In many ways, that was when the difficult part began. A new language, a new household, a new social position, and, occasionally, a new husband chosen by circumstances rather than romance. Although romance itself was a complicated business in the medieval world, we often imagine marriage as something personal and emotional, built around two people falling deeply in love. Sometimes it was. But for many medieval families, marriage was also an arrangement, a practical agreement, a way to combine property, a way to strengthen alliances, a way to prevent two families from fighting each other for the next 20 years, which was considered a success. A peaceful marriage was apparently the medieval equivalent of a miracle. Naturally, everyone immediately tried to complicate it. Viking society placed great importance on family connections. A person's identity was not just their own. It belonged to a network. Your parents mattered. Your grandparents mattered. Your relatives mattered. Your enemies' relatives also mattered, unfortunately, because medieval grudges had impressive endurance. A disagreement between two men could become a problem between two families, then two villages, then eventually a situation where everyone involved had forgotten why they were angry, but remained committed to being angry anyway. Women played important roles inside these networks. A marriage could connect different families. A woman entering a new household carried more than personal belongings. She carried relationships, knowledge, skills, sometimes wealth, sometimes political importance. This meant some women who entered Viking society from outside eventually became respected members of their communities. Not because the world suddenly became fair. It did not. Medieval societies remained deeply unequal, but usefulness created influence, and skilled people were valuable. A woman who understood farming, medicine, trade, or textile production could become essential to a household, especially in isolated communities where everyone needed to contribute. The Viking farm was not a place where someone could simply sit around waiting for life to happen. There was always something to do. Animals needed feeding. Food needed preserving. Clothes needed repairing. Buildings needed maintaining. Children needed raising. And somewhere nearby, probably, there was a person complaining that someone else was not doing enough work. A timeless human tradition. The idea of the helpless medieval woman is mostly a later invention. Many Viking women managed property. Some owned land. Some arranged marriages. Some controlled households while men were away trading or raiding. A woman running a farm during a husband's long voyage was not unusual. Someone had to keep everything functioning. A man could return home with foreign silver and impressive stories. But if nobody had maintained the farm while he was gone, he would return to a very impressive pile of silver sitting beside an empty field, which is not particularly useful. This practical authority gave some women a surprising degree of independence, especially wealthy women. Poor women had fewer choices, as they usually did throughout history. Money has always been remarkably good at creating options, even in the Viking Age. Perhaps especially then. Archaeological discoveries have revealed women buried with keys. This might sound ordinary. It was not. Keys were symbols of household authority. They represented control over storage rooms, food supplies, and valuable goods. A key was not just a key. It was a tiny piece of social power. Imagine a medieval woman wearing keys at her belt. A small metal reminder that while others might own the land, she controlled what was inside the buildings. The grain, the supplies, the household resources. It was a quiet form of authority, not the kind that appears in dramatic paintings. No crowns, no trumpets, just a person who knew exactly where everything was stored. And perhaps everyone else knew better than to move anything without asking. Now, among the most fascinating women connected to the Viking world were those who became rulers themselves. Their stories are often mixed with legend, because medieval writers had a habit of adding a little extra drama whenever possible. A queen was rarely allowed to simply be competent. She had to be mysterious, beautiful, dangerous, sometimes all three. One famous example is Aud the Deep-Minded. Aud lived during the 9th century and became one of the most remarkable women in Viking history. Her life was filled with the kind of events that sound almost impossible. She was born into a powerful Norse family. She married Olaf the White, a Norse ruler connected with Ireland. Their marriage connected powerful families across the Viking world. But, as medieval marriages often did, it eventually became complicated. Her husband died. Her son also died. And instead of disappearing into history, Aud did something extraordinary. She gathered followers and sailed west. Not as a frightened refugee. Not as someone waiting for another ruler to decide her future. She organized her own migration. She commanded a ship. She brought family members and supporters. She settled land in Iceland. She arranged marriages. She distributed property. She became the founder of a new community. In a world where many women had limited legal power, Aud operated with remarkable authority. The sagas remembered her as wise, which, in medieval terms, was one of the highest compliments available. They did not simply describe her as beautiful or wealthy. They described her as intelligent, a useful quality, especially when trying to survive in a landscape where winter regularly attempted to kill everyone. Iceland itself was a fascinating destination, a land of volcanoes, glaciers, and extremely enthusiastic weather. A place where people looked at a remote island in the North Atlantic and thought, yes, this seems like the perfect place to build a society. Because apparently medieval explorers had a different relationship with risk. They saw empty land. They saw opportunity. They did not see months of darkness and cold wind. Or perhaps they did. And simply accepted the challenge. Among these settlers were many women whose origins were outside Scandinavia. Some came from Britain and Ireland. Some arrived through marriage. Some through captivity. Some through unknown circumstances. Over time, they became part of Icelandic society. Their descendants became Icelanders. The boundaries between cultures slowly disappeared. A person born centuries later might never know that one of their ancestors had once arrived unwillingly from another shore. This is one of history's strange habits. It turns individual tragedies into ordinary family histories. A moment that changed someone's entire life becomes, generations later, simply, "My ancestors came from there." The emotional weight disappears. The movement remains. This does not mean the suffering should be forgotten. It simply shows how human beings rebuild. They create homes in unfamiliar places. They raise children. They tell stories. They plant crops. They create traditions, even after losing everything familiar. Perhaps that is one reason Viking history remains so fascinating. It is not only about conquest. It is about adaptation. The Viking world was constantly changing. Pagan became Christian. Small farms became kingdoms. Raiders became rulers. Foreign captives became ancestors. The same people who once arrived as outsiders sometimes became the foundation of new societies. History has a strange sense of irony. The person who enters a country as a prisoner may have descendants who later call that country home. The person whose language was once unfamiliar may become part of the language itself. The person whose culture was once foreign may help create the culture that comes afterward. Time has a way of rearranging everything. Kings become footnotes, battles become dates, and ordinary people quietly become the threads holding the entire story together. So tonight, as we continue our journey, we leave behind the image of Viking women only as victims of raids. Some certainly suffered. Many experienced terrible uncertainty, but others adapted, negotiated, survived, and sometimes even shaped the societies around them. The Viking Age was not built only by warriors holding swords. It was built by countless people holding much less dramatic objects. A spindle, a cooking knife, a set of keys, a child's hand. Small things, ordinary things, the things that keep a world alive. And next, we will drift toward one of the strangest questions of all. What happened when Viking women themselves became powerful figures? Women who owned ships, controlled wealth, influenced politics, and occasionally made the men around them extremely uncomfortable by being much better at ruling than expected. Because history has always had a habit of underestimating people, especially those who were quietly getting everything done. Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we continue drifting through the quieter currents of the Viking Age. The waves keep moving. The old wooden halls grow darker as evening settles. Somewhere, a fire is crackling. Somewhere else, a person is probably trying to repair a piece of clothing that absolutely did not survive the day as well as they hoped. Because medieval life was often less about grand adventures and more about constantly fixing things. Fixing roofs. Fixing tools. Fixing relationships. Fixing mistakes made by people who probably should have known better. A surprisingly modern problem. When we imagine Vikings, we often picture men, warriors, explorers, kings with impressive names and even more impressive confidence. History loves those figures. They are easy to place. A man with a sword is simple to understand. A woman managing property, influencing politics, and controlling resources is much harder to fit into the usual story. So naturally, many historical accounts ignored her. Because history has always had a weakness for loud people. The quiet ones often had to wait centuries before anyone noticed them. But Viking society produced women who possessed real influence. Not modern equality. Not a world without restrictions. But genuine authority. And in some cases, quite a lot of it. The Viking household was built around cooperation. The popular image of a Viking husband leaving for months while his wife simply waited patiently at home is incomplete. A farm was a complicated operation. A household was practically a small company. There were animals to manage, food supplies to protect, workers to organize, trade goods to store, children to raise. and someone had to make hundreds of small decisions every day. The person making those decisions often had considerable power, especially when men were away. A Viking voyage could last months, sometimes longer. A trader might disappear across the Baltic Sea. A raider might travel to Britain, Ireland, or beyond. An explorer might leave and never return. The ocean was not a reliable co-worker. It rarely sent updates. There was no medieval version of running late, storm delayed me, see you next spring, just silence. So households needed someone capable of keeping everything together. Many women filled that role. They were not simply waiting. They were managing. One of the strongest symbols of female authority in Viking culture was the key. We mentioned earlier how keys were discovered in wealthy women's graves. These keys represented control. A person with the keys controlled access to valuable household resources, food stores, chests, supplies, trade goods. In a world where survival depended on preparation, controlling supplies meant controlling life itself. A person could have a sword and still go hungry. A person with the keys could decide whether everyone ate well through winter. The power was quiet. But quiet power is still power. Perhaps especially quiet power. Because nobody notices the person preventing disaster. They only notice when disaster arrives. Now let's drift toward one of the most fascinating figures of the Viking world, Lagertha. Her story is famous. A warrior woman. A fighter. A figure who appears in later medieval writing and modern entertainment. But here we need to slow down a little, because history and legend often become tangled together. Lagertha may represent a real tradition of women warriors, or she may be a legendary figure built from older stories. The medieval writers who recorded her were not modern historians carefully separating evidence. They were storytellers, and storytellers enjoy adding a little extra decoration. A good story rarely arrives wearing plain clothing. It usually shows up wearing a dramatic cloak. Still, the existence of warrior women in Viking society is not impossible. Archaeology has found some graves containing weapons alongside female remains. The interpretation of these burials is debated. A weapon does not always mean someone fought. A sword could represent status, family connection, symbolic importance. But the discoveries do suggest that the relationship between women and warfare was more complicated than the old stereotype suggests. The Viking world was practical. If someone could contribute, someone was valued. That contribution might be farming, trade, craftsmanship, leadership, or, occasionally, combat. Although it is worth remembering that most people in history were not warriors. Despite what movies suggest, the average Viking did not spend every morning dramatically sharpening an axe while staring into the distance. Most people had chores, very uncinematic chores. The heroic image was reserved for a small number of people. Everyone else was busy surviving. Another powerful woman from Viking history was Freydis Eriksdottir. Her story comes from Icelandic sagas connected with exploration of North America. Again, the sagas blend history and storytelling. They preserve memories, but they also enjoy drama. Freydis is described as a strong-willed woman who traveled with expeditions connected to Vinland. The accounts portray her as fearless, aggressive, and difficult to control. A person who did not politely step aside when events became complicated, which, in medieval storytelling, usually meant someone was about to become controversial. And Freydis certainly became controversial. The sagas describe conflicts, arguments, and moments where her determination crossed into cruelty. Whether every detail is true is impossible to know, but the character itself reveals something important. The writers could imagine women as powerful actors, not merely background figures, not just mothers and wives, people capable of making decisions that affected entire groups, even if those decisions made everyone else uncomfortable. History is filled with powerful people who were described as difficult, a word that often means they refused to behave in the way others expected. Naturally, societies have always been very comfortable with confident men. Confident women have often received more complicated reviews. Medieval Scandinavia was no exception. Another fascinating example comes from women who became wealthy landowners. In Iceland especially, women could inherit property under certain circumstances. They could arrange marriages. They could manage estates. They could participate in legal disputes. The legal system was not modern. It was not equal by today's standards. But compared with many other societies of the period, Scandinavian women sometimes possessed notable rights. A woman could own possessions. She could sometimes divorce. She could control property. She could seek compensation. These details matter because they remind us that the past was never a single simple picture. The medieval world contained both restriction and opportunity, both inequality and independence, both cruelty and cooperation. Humans are complicated. Unfortunately for historians, humans have remained complicated for thousands of years. A person in the Viking Age could believe strongly in tradition while also breaking tradition. They could follow old customs while creating new ones. They could live in a harsh society and still show kindness. They could be victims of violence and also participate in violence themselves. History rarely provides perfect heroes or perfect villains. Mostly it provides people, and people are messy. Perhaps that is why the stories of Viking women remain so interesting. Their lives were not always dramatic. Most days were probably ordinary. A woman woke up, prepared food, worked with wool, managed animals, raised children, argued with relatives, complained about the weather. Because complaining about the weather is apparently one human tradition that survived perfectly intact. Then, occasionally, something extraordinary happened. A voyage, a marriage alliance, a political dispute, a sudden change in fortune, and someone who had spent years quietly working behind the scenes suddenly found themselves shaping history. The Viking world was built on movement. Ships moved, goods moved, ideas moved, and people moved. Sometimes by choice, sometimes not. But wherever they went, women carried knowledge with them. How to make food, how to make clothing, how to raise children, how to survive. The most important technologies of the medieval world were not always made of iron. Sometimes they were memories, skills, traditions, the things people carried when they had nothing else. So as the evening grows quieter, we can leave these women for a moment, not as shadows behind Viking warriors, but as part of the story itself. Farmers, mothers, traders, captives, settlers, leaders, women who crossed oceans and rebuilt lives, women who held keys, women who controlled households, women who, occasionally, made history, usually without anyone bothering to write their names down. And perhaps that is the most Viking thing of all. Not the battles, not the ships, not the legends, but the stubborn ability to continue, to build something new on unfamiliar ground, to wake up the next morning and begin again. Next, we will drift further into the final generations of the Viking world. When these societies transformed, Christianity spread, kingdoms formed, and many of the old ways slowly disappeared into memory. Because even the loudest ages eventually become quiet. And the Viking Age was no exception.